support.
The maestro, please!
End of April, which means it's time for yet another pop analysis. Today we'll be looking at Too Sweet by Hozier.
Hozier.
Andrew Hozier Byrne, known simply as Hozier, is a musician, singer, and songwriter straight out of Ireland who first came to prominence back in 2013 with Take Me to Church, I worship like a dog at the shrine of your life. It's been a long time coming, but that's not to say they haven't had another pop hit since then, such as
Background.
Too Sweet was originally released on March 22nd of 2024, charting 2 weeks later at number 5, and at the end of the month, finally hitting number 1. Too Sweet is the only single off of Hozier's album Unheard that was released the same day. Unheard itself is a collection of tracks that didn't actually make it on his previous album, Unreal Unearth. That being said, that same day, a version of the album was released that has the 4 tracks included, simply called Unreal Unearth, Unheard. Credits besides Hozier on this album include Becken, The Donuts, Stuart Johnson, Chakra, and Peter G. Daniel Tannenbaum, simply known as Becken, is no stranger to the pop scene, having credits dating all the way back to
They won't take me on my element, nah, take me on my element. I'm allergic to a bitch nigga, ayy, and imagine.
That being said, they have not been completely absent from the pop scene since then, with other hits such as
Give me love, give me love, give me love.
Oddly enough, both The Donuts and Chakra are on this as well. Speaking of The Donuts, they are a songwriting production duo consisting of Sergio Gehrman and Tyler Mellenbacher. Besides the work that I previously mentioned, they've also continued to work with artists like Kendrick Lamar, such as on
My auntie is a man now. I think I'm old enough to understand now. Drinking Parmesan with her.
And oddly enough, credits on that song also include Becken and Chakra. Stuart Johnson, mostly known as a drummer, is another artist who is no stranger to the scene, working with the likes of similar artists we've talked about so far, such as
Do yourself a favor and get a mirror that mirror grievance, then point it at me so the reflection can mirror freedom.
Oddly enough, The Donuts, Becken, and Chakra are on that one as well, and
Teach me to love just to let me go.
which additionally also has Becken and The Donuts on it. Going down the list, we next have Daniel Krieger, better known simply as Chakra, and I would talk about the stuff he's done, but in talking about the previous credits, we've also talked about all of the major songs that he's worked on already. Finally, that leaves us with Peter Gonzalez, sometimes known simply as Peter G, and outside their work with Hozier, this is their first pop hit. Too Sweet is released by Ruby Works, Island, and Columbia.
Form.
Too Sweet is listed solely as a soul song, is 4 minutes 11 seconds long, 4/4 time, G minor, and 117 beats per minute. After the instrumental intro, we get the first verse,
It can't be said I'm an early bird.
followed by the first pre-chorus,
You just wanna wake up, dark as a lake.
the first chorus,
I think I'll take my whiskey and leave.
and then the first post-chorus. That pattern then repeats with the second verse,
I aim low, I aim true, and the ground's where I go.
second pre-chorus,
You can sit in a barrel, maybe I'll wait.
second chorus,
My coffee black in my bed at 3. You're too sweet for me.
and finally second post-chorus. We then transition to the outro, which is really just another chorus,
You're too sweet for me.
before finally ending the song.
Bass.
Probably the most significant instrument in the song, sometimes being doubled by an additional guitar, doing this fairly syncopated beat, mostly focusing on the roots of the harmony that we will discuss later. Starting off on that low G, working its way up to that A, then to the B flat, and then finally doing these little creeping figures on the C and D before going to the next phrase. The following following phrase still kind of repeats those ideas, very syncopated, very short, started on that low F for 2 bars, going up to the G before dropping down to the E flat at the end. The bass does, though, have an alternate second phrase that it does at various points throughout the song. Notice here that those first 2 bars are still the same, syncopated low Fs, but it jumps all the way to that B flat before dropping to the A this time. Minus that, there's only one additional bass part. We drop the syncopation, almost doing this halftime feel, much more extended, but the notes are still pretty much the same. We're starting off on those low Gs, working our way up to that B flat, and even at the end going as high as that D. And in the following second phrase, starting off on that E flat before dropping back to the B flat, going to the D, but then hitting that F sharp at the end. Chords. The chords that can be difficult to hear at times, as we've filtered out the main vocals, start off on this held G minor chord for 2 bars before going to a B flat major over F chord. The following phrase goes back to that G minor chord, but now over D, and even goes back to that B flat major chord, but now over D. However, it finally ends on a D major chord. The chords get fleshed out a bit more as we move on through the song, now having that guitar arpeggiating a chord underneath it, kind of making the chords a bit more spelled out and honestly easier to hear. Notice how we still have that G minor chord, but it's now over D, and we still have that B flat major chord still being over F. It is here, though, that things get a bit more fleshed out and more intricate. With the addition of that guitar underneath, we now have an E flat major 7 chord moving to a B flat major 9 over F before finally resolving to a D dominant 7 over F sharp. Bells. Specifically orchestral bells used to flesh out the thicker textures a bit more. It's fairly simplistic, starting off on that G, working its way down, going G, F, and then D, and then that final bar going from D back to F. And the following phrase puts it back at that G, once more going down to G and then F, and now ending on that D. Harmonica. The first post-chorus actually has a harmonica solo, starting off on that high D, working up to the E flat, going back down to the D, and ending on that C in the first phrase. The following phrase has it re-articulate that C before going down to B flat, hitting that B flat one more time, and hitting that C, given it gets distorted at the end as it fades out. Verse. The verses tend to have Hozier very breathy at the start, and very much in the middle of his range. Notice there's not as much syncopation as there is in maybe the bass part, but there's still a large focus on 8th note styled rhythms.
It can't be said I'm an early bird. It's 10 o'clock before I say a word.
The following phrase does get a bit more complicated, doing even more 8th notes and having more up and down motions, in addition to having more melismas.
Baby, I can never tell. How do you sleep so well? You keep telling me to live right.
The final part of the first verse does repeat those ideas that the first phrases put forth, going up and down, 8th note rhythms, and even more melismas on top of that. Notice how he's very much emphasizing those up and down figures, though, especially at the end.
To go to bed before the daylight, but then you wake up for the sunrise. You know you don't gotta pretend, baby, now and then.
The second verse has him a bit less breathy and a bit larger in leaps. Notice that it's also much more spaced out, and we even have a little C sharp thrown in there.
I aim low, I aim true, and the ground's where I go. I work late where I'm free from the phone.
Unlike the first verse, he gets actually less complicated rhythmically. Notice how we have this run of quarter notes in the middle before going back to the up and down eighth note figures.
And the job gets done, but you worry some. I know, but who wants to live forever, babe?
That being said, the second verse does end very similarly to the first verse. These up and down figures, melismas, and these eighth note rhythms.
You treat your mouth as if it's heaven's gate. The rest of you like you're the TSA. I wish I could go along. They don't get me wrong.
Pre-chorus.
The pre-chorus does have an additional layer an octave higher in the background, but you'll notice here that there's not so much going up and down figures anymore. It's now always going up with these eighth note figures.
You just wanna wake up, dark as a lake, smelling like a bonfire, lost in the haze.
He does keep doing those upward motions, given in the second phrase, there's a bit less of them, opting to stay high, and again, we get a C sharp thrown in there.
If you're drunk on life, babe, I think it's great, but while in this world,
The second pre-chorus is pretty much the same, given there's a couple of changes due to different words that he's saying.
you know you're bright as the morning, soft as the rain, pretty as a vine, sweet as a grape.
I guess one of the larger differences, though, is that in the second phrase, he does more of the upward figures as opposed to some of those in the first pre-chorus, where he was staying a bit higher.
You can sit in a barrel, maybe I'll wait until that day.
Chorus.
The most viral part of the song, starting up much higher in his range. Notice there's a large focus on quarter notes at the beginning, and those long held out, yet quite simplistic melismas that are thrown in occasionally. Notice how he still has an up and down figure, though, on the third bar of this phrase.
I think I'll take my whiskey and leave my coffee back in my bed at 3.
When we get to the actual too sweet part of the song, though, you'll notice he focuses on these longer melismas in addition to more of the quarter note rhythms.
You're too sweet for me. You're too sweet for me.
He then essentially repeats that, given there are some slight alterations. You'll notice that now on the word 3, it's a quick melisma as opposed to a half note.
I take my whiskey and leave my coffee black in my bed at 3.
Similarly speaking, at the end of the chorus, that last line on me, the melisma is now much longer.
You're too sweet for me. You're too sweet for me.
Post-chorus.
In the post-chorus, we have Hozier in thirds with the background vocals, and notice on the back end of those melismas, he's doing the same rhythm that he did in the chorus on the word me, that dotted quarter note, eighth note, half note line. You'll also notice as the post-chorus proceeds, it gets lower and lower. Unlike in the first phrase, in the second phrase, he still got lower, but now that subphrase is repeated twice. The second post-chorus is pretty much melodically identical to the first post-chorus. The only difference is it's a bit of a different texture, mostly due to the fact that instead of going ooh, they're now going whoa.
Outro.
For all intents and purposes, the outro is just really another chorus. The difference is that it starts off almost like with the second half of the choruses that we've heard. There's no lead-in. He simply goes, I take my whiskey neat.
I take my whiskey, my coffee back in my bed at 3.
Similarly, the outro ends like the last part of the chorus, with that very long me melisma, given he does drop off at the end for the end of the song.
You're too sweet for me. You're too sweet for me.
Been a while since we've had a song top both the Hot Rock Songs chart and the Hot 100. Hasn't happened since 2022 with Steve Lacy's Bad Habit, and that was a crossover with R&B and hip-hop as well. Take out the crossovers and we're all the way back to 2021 with Imagine Dragons' Enemy. Regardless, it's finally nice to see Hozier get his #1 hit song, especially considering the song before this that he was known for, Take Me to Church back in 2013, only got to #2. So again, finally nice to see Hozier get his dues, especially since I have a lot in common with Hozier. For example, I also
Take my whiskey and leave my coffee black and my bed at 3. You're too sweet for me. You're too sweet for me.
Well, he at least got to top the chart for 1 week. Unfortunately for him, Taylor Swift is Taylor Swift, and honestly, May's pop analysis is probably going to be one of these anyway.
I take my whiskey and leave